I think there has to be a disclaimer now. There should be a disclaimer. Spotify, this is on you, because it's still owned and run by Spotify. So Spotify, you should have to put something at the start of these now that is like, by the way, his opinions do not reflect the general consensus of the scientific body, and he's now going to spout conspiracy theories. That's the start of this. Enjoy, eat up. Did you know that COVID was made in a lab? Did you know that not only it was made in a lab, that it was released from the lab with malicious intent? If you didn't know that, or you think it's ridiculous, you haven't been paying attention. You haven't been paying attention to the one true scientific mind of our era. That's right. Mr. Bro Rogan. Now, Bro Rogan has been pushing this conspiracy theory for a while on the rest of the bros, but it turns out he was dead wrong. That the whole thing is ridiculous and slightly xenophobic, if I do say so myself. I mean, just consistently pushing this narrative that it must have been either created in a lab or released in a lab as some part of concerned or coordinated effort in order to, like, either you're saying that the scientists in China are woefully inept and they just create super viruses and then release them because they're like, oh, oops, why? Or you think that they have some kind of evil dictatorial government that is trying to say, well, I don't care if I kill 80,000 of my own citizens. I can just release this into the global economy, collapse it, the same global economy that I'm dependent on to purchase my goods and services. Either way, seems odd, seems weird, but hey, there was an investigation. The WHO went in. They got to release a whole bunch of their information publicly. Since doing so, they pretty much stated emphatically, by the way, the evidence of this is pretty striking, that this was in fact not a synthetic man-made virus, that it was actually most likely transferred from animals to humans, as is often the case with viruses. This is a pretty prominent theme that we see. This could have something to do with us talking about our mass meat manufacturing. We could also bring up the fact that we don't ever talk about that, how the current way that we manufacture meat, beyond being unbelievably cruel, like just unfathomably cruel, you can imagine such levels of cruelty taking place on a regular basis, also leads to quite a large amount of diseases. We can do things better. That could be a different conversation we could have. But no, Joe has now, I guess, this is not even doubling, this is quadrupling? I don't know how many this has been at this point.
There's no part of the mainstream that looks at all credible to me anymore.
Well, it's real wacky now, right? And here's a wacky one where the New York Times is they're debunking this idea that the Wuhan lab may have been the source of COVID, when they're like, when all these different people are talking about it.
We've been on this for.
That's you. You're the people. You're doing that. You're doing it right now, and then your friends are doing it too, and then the rest of the intellectual dark. Those are the people, and then the scientists on the other hand are like, well, can you just maybe pay attention to this? Yeah, the science and the reports and the studies and the analysis on this, like, we know a little bit more than you, but then you're like, but then people are talking about it, right?
For forever.
We have been on it forever. What it's extraordinary is the New York Times is still saying debunked claims with no evidence whatsoever. You know, Sagar and Jetty from the Rising and The Hill had this whole piece about it on his YouTube channel.
I love what they're doing.
They're the best. They're the best.
What stage on the horseshoe is this one? I don't know where I am anymore. It's just a weird place to be on the internet. They're the best, you know. I'm not really fond of the World Health Organization or the scientists who are working towards this, but I do loves me some Morning Hill. They're good.
Well, he's got two channels. Have you been on either?
Well, I've only had him on here and Crystal together. But what I liked about
what you guys did right at the beginning of that, where they.
That was your problem. You should have gotten rid of Crystal, just gone full Saga, and then have him explain to you everything that you're willing to want to learn. You know, it's going to be all laid out, unfiltered.
Explained what happens. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
What happens in the cycle when your team wins and your team loses, and how they've both broken out of that and they've thrown that away. And
yes.
That was 10 minutes
yeah.
that I needed to hear. I thought you broke new. The three of you guys broke really new ground.
They're what we need.
Yeah.
There's a reasonable person on the left and a reasonable person on the right, and they're both committed to honesty above all. Right? They might have different philosophical
I think they're coming together. I think
perspectives.
Crystal is coming towards Sagar because she's seeing
Yes.
the rot on the left.
Yes.
And what my hope is that she's going to be a credible progressive who's rejecting all this nonsense progressive.
Oh no. Oh no. I was just memeing. I wasn't actually talking about a horseshoe theory, because horseshoe theory isn't really real, but why are you trying to make it so? Don't do this to me now. Come on.
Yeah, I think you're right. She's very smart, and so is he, and the two of them together are wonderful.
What were you
They're
going to say
magic.
before I cut you off?
What I was going to say is they were talking about how the New York Times is talking about this I forget who they were quoting, who was entertaining this
Redfield.
idea. Was that what it was?
Ex-CDC
That's
guy?
right, the CDC guy. That he was entertaining this idea, this debunked idea of this emanating from a lab. But it's not debunked. Not only is it not debunked, it's more possible than ever. But the problem is the idea was...
You can't say that. You can't, like, you can't just say, I reject the information proposed, and now it's more powerful than ever. Like, that's not how these things work. It's not like your ideas suddenly become all the more righteous. Then you're an ideologue. Because you're just pushing one concept when people are like, if you're pushed back against and you genuinely are in good faith willing to like take in the information like you say you are, because that's why you love the Hill apparently. It's just, it's two reasonable people trying to get down to the truth. And so someone's like, okay, so here's the truth. You can't be like, yeah, so now it's more plausible than ever, my theories I have.
Originally associated with Donald Trump. So these motherfuckers at the New York Times still have it in their head that they can't admit.
I don't know that that's what's going on, Joe.
What do you think it is?
Well, that what they do, it's a weird move.
We should tell people exactly what they're saying. Okay, the former head of the CDC is saying that it's more probable than not. He's not saying it's absolute. He's saying it's more probable than not that it escaped from a lab.
Right.
And he details it, and he actually predates it. He goes he goes like deep into September and October. He believes it might have emanated around that time and started spreading. The reason why is, and it all makes total sense. This is a very unusual laboratory. The laboratory had been cited in 2018 for safety protocol violations. The laboratory works on the exact same kinds of coronaviruses that caused this worldwide pandemic on bats. They work on bat coronaviruses. And this is one of 2 level 4 labs that are in this area. So this whole thing is it's so much more likely that it emanated from the lab. But the problem is,
so the second part you just added, that it's so much more likely, that's completely spurious. So looking this up, yeah, Dr. Robert Redfield, the former director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, said recently that he believes the novel coronavirus originated in a lab in Wuhan, China, and escaped, and that was partially one of the reasons. That does not give you any factual evidence as towards whether or not that happened. He can give you his anecdote, but he has not been on the ground. He has not been studying the area. He is not part of the investigation team that has now concluded that apparently this is not like this has been debunked. That's what the New York Times was trying to put forward. The people who are allowed to take this in, they actually went into the area that were studying this. They've already ascertained that this is a non-starter. The fact that you're still pushing this, you're doubling this down, that's pretty uniquely in right-wing circles now. Like if I look up all the different news organizations that push this, New York Post. Oh, this is China. I was like, wait, what is saying this? Let's read China's official state media. Let's go full tanky. Robert Redfield, the former director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, told CNN in a new documentary that the coronavirus could have escaped from a lab in Wuhan and said it was circulating months before it came to the public's attention in December 2019. However, the WHO's research team in Wuhan said there's no evidence that any labs in China were working on the virus prior to the outbreak. Well, nothing to see here, everybody. We have unabashed, unfiltered information. This is good to know. Let's not look up any other sources. Did COVID-19 come from a lab? Most likely not, but the jury's still out. See, that's a reasonable thing to say, Joe, all right? That I don't fully know yet. I don't have all the information, but most likely not. That to me is pretty, I mean, I know the far leftist pinko communist publication Forbes, so you'll have to forgive me here, but here we go. After nearly a year-long delay, a team of scientists from the World Health Organization visited China on a mission to determine the origins of the SARS novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19. The mystery should be solved, right? Well, not exactly. The trip was short, chaperoned by some team members, and they complained they didn't get enough unfettered access. These are all valid criticisms, fair criticisms to levy at the Chinese government. Much more fair criticisms to levy at them than saying that they may have been doing this as part of some kind of weaponized conspiracy theory. I don't know, but this one seems a lot more reasonable. March 30th, 2021, the WHO released a report of its findings, which was generated after a review of national surveillance data, animal and human genomic data, lab disease confirmations, published information, pharmacy purchase reports, amongst other things. It's a lot of data to process. The report concluded that the lab leak was extremely unlikely. So again, someone who has compiled all of this kind of stuff, I trust a little bit more than Joe Rogan on the other side, just being like, it's more likely than ever now. You don't know. Bro? You don't know. Far from being the final word on the lab hypothesis, to add confusion, Dr. Robert Redfield, former director of the CDC in the Trump administration, recently declared that he thought the virus most likely escaped from a laboratory. Perhaps he read my prior article on the 4 ways a virus could escape, because Dr. Redfield's opinion was quickly denounced by Dr. Nancy Fauci, who said there are other alternatives that other people hold by. Why do we care? Well, because we're kind of racist and we want to blame China for the whole thing. What is needed? The question remains on whether the current pandemic began through natural spillover events and some other means, or through a lab leak. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to prove the negative. The virus did not come from a lab. Even so, the only real way to determine what happened is to conduct a detailed investigation into how it all began. This details 2 key aspects: a field outbreak investigation tied together with a laboratory forensic investigation. The interviews that the WHO team conducted in China and the records that we're able to review can start to help to point out that this part of the investigation might begin. Much like any outbreak investigation, the team would want to examine clinics, hospital records, patient laboratory and radiology results, chest x-rays, CT scans, even before the first known cases were reported in late 2019 to identify potential unrecognized cases. They might want to start in areas in Wuhan and then branch out to other parts of the country. The holy grail is to try and track the outbreak back to patient 0, the first case or the earliest cases. This is important because the outbreak often follows a similar pattern. Interesting. So what you should be saying right now, if you were a responsible person with your platform, is that the jury's completely out on this one, but the evidence is distinctly pointing towards the fact that it is unlikely that it came from a lab. They're pretty conclusive about that. However, what we should be pushing for is a more transparent investigation, to not have the Chinese government try to oversee and control the entire thing. Those are fair criticisms to levy, whereas everything else is you kind of wanting to buy into this conspiracy theory because Trump's the old manager of the CDC under Trump recently said this, adding to the confusion.
The narrative was Donald Trump is racist.
Whoa, wait, what? Meet Trump's new homophobic public health quack. My latest? No way. Of course. The Centers for Disease Control will soon be run by a military doctor with a long history of pushing discriminatory AIDS policies. Ding, 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 ding. The extraordinarily disruptive turnover in the Trump administration senior staff has officially reached the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The White House, having already cycled through one CDC director, named its second, Robert Redfield, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel and former University of Maryland opioids and AIDS researcher. He's exactly the wrong person for the job amid an exploding influenza epidemic across the United States, an opioid crisis that has decreased the statistical life expectancy of Americans, and a budget crisis that twice compelled closure of critical laboratory and disease-fighting services. The CDC desperately needs a leader who can promise stability and expertise. Redfield represents the opposite. He is someone whose track record with HIV research and public health policy has been a scientific and moral failure. The White House, in all likelihood, has carefully scrutinized Redfield's financial history, especially after it was criticized for failing to adequately vet Trump's first CDC director, Brenda Fitzgerald, who was forced to resign in January after revelations of multiple conflicts of interest involving stocks and other investments. But Redfield has failed to pass political vetting before, not just for economic reasons. In 2002, President George Bush considered but rejected Redfield for the top CDC job because his work on AIDS was deemed excessively controversial. Well, tell me. From the early 1980s to early 1990s, when the AIDS epidemic was claiming a staggering death toll and no treatment for HIV existed, Redfield was a U.S. Army major and a vaccine researcher at the Walter Reed Army Institute and Research in Maryland. During the President Ronald Reagan's administration, Redfield guided the military's public health response to HIV infections within the armed forces and also its pursuits of a vaccine against the virus. In both tasks, Redfield proved extremely controversial. Amongst the Defense Department policies that Redfield helped design was mandatory testing of all troops for HIV without confidentiality, beginning in October 1985. Any soldier, sailor, pilot, or Marine who proved to be infected would quickly learn that his entire chain of command was aware of his status, outing them. Often before he was informed, recruits were screened, and those who were tested positive were barred from service. Active duty personnel were also tested, and if positive would face degrading mistreatment, as I discovered in 1989 when I reported in and around Fort Hood, the Army's largest training and staging area located in Texas. Terrified 18 and 19-year-old soldiers found to be infected with HIV would be isolated to a special barracks wing known to the base as the HIV Hotel, or the leper colony, where they would be treated like prisoners until they developed full-blown AIDS and were discharged dishonorably. The military seemed intent on administratively punishing infected soldiers for their HIV status. Soldiers described as summoning to meet with a chaplain who would then inform them that they had tested positive for HIV, to counsel them while military police rifled through their barracks searching for evidence of homosexuality and names of possible sex partners. He was part of the gay AIDS scare of the 1980s. That is fucked. You go through Article 15, disciplinary actions list, and see how many are HIV HIV. One discharged soldier told me in 1989, they're giving out 7 to 8 Article 15s a day over there. There's no morale. About 5 million soldiers and recruits were tested in 1989. 6,000 of them were proving to be HIV positive. Anecdotally, many of the young men committed suicide, and most of them were drummed out of the military without medical coverage, dying impoverished from their AIDS disease. If the Defense Department kept score of the tragedy, the eventual post-discharge outcomes for many thousands of HIV-positive military personnel were never publicly documented. That is just fucking cruel and inhumane. Well, fuck that guy.
Trump calls it the China virus. Donald Trump says it came from a lab. It can't have come from a lab because Donald Trump's always wrong.
That's one possibility. I'm worried about something beyond that.
What are you worried about?
The way that they make this move is that they synonymize the lab leak hypothesis with a synthetic virus engineered from scratch. So in other words, the idea of like maybe somebody growing horseshoe-back coronavirus in human lung tissue to accelerate natural selection, because like we don't know how to engineer it, but if you let natural selection engineer it, you can accelerate that, right? So instead of saying we don't know what to make of accelerated natural selection in a lab leaking, they try to make this move, which is like, there's no sign that this was engineered in a lab. And you're like, okay, well, you changed what the hypothesis is in order to say what you're saying to protect your future credibility. And the thing that I'm really freaking out about, you've been talking about it, Brett's been talking about it, I've been talking about, all sorts of people have been talking about this one for a year. I increasingly think that none of these organizations think that they owe us any kind of truth. That when they get caught, it's just like, yeah, of course we had to say that. You're like, what? Yeah. Like this Time magazine article about, of course we fortified the election. You what? Oh yeah, we fortified it. Oh, Trump was right about a conspiracy. Like in the article.
I think there has to be a disclaimer now. There should be a disclaimer. Spotify, this is on you, because it's still owned and run by Spotify. So Spotify, you should have to put something at the start of these now that is like, by the way, his opinions do not reflect the general consensus of the scientific body, and he's now going to spout conspiracy theories. That's the start of this. Enjoy, eat up. I do want to end this on slightly good news. Good news, everyone, since we're talking about AIDS and the AIDS crisis, which yes, has, I believe, killed 60 million people. Up to this point, the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative and Scripps Research have recently announced the results of an important phase 1 clinical trial. The researchers tested a new vaccine approach designed to prevent HIV infections by stimulating the production of rare immune cells. These cells are needed to create right antibodies to fight HIV. The trial saw 48 participants divided into a low-dose group and a high-dose group. They received either the vaccine candidate or the placebo. Of those who received the vaccine, 97% had developed the right immune cells to respond to an HIV infection. Meaning, if this goes on to phase 2, then phase 3, and becomes available for public consumption, we have cured AIDS. We've gone and done it. Well, not cured AIDS in that we have a cure for AIDS, in that we can prevent AIDS if we vaccinate the entirety of the population with this vaccine, aka we can eliminate AIDS the way we've eliminated, well, okay, that came back. That came back too. So we need to stop the anti-vax movement because we have some good things here, but we should celebrate that at least. All right, let's enjoy that. Here we go. Well done, science. Well done. Good job, science. 97%. That's fucking unreal. That's unreal. Unreal. Yeah. So good news, everyone. Now we just need to get it into everyone's bloodstreams. We'll do it through the water, you see. That's how everything's gonna work, right? Yeah, Africa probably won't receive a lot of the vaccine. Nope, that's not the way capitalism works. Hey, come on. What are you trying to do here? Are we just gonna dole out free vaccines? What, on the poors? No, heaven forbid. My word. Huh. Good thing the anti-vax movement is also anti-sex education. Yeah, I know. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. That's why you get things like actual panics and scares and stuff like that. It's the most efficient system. Why not just make that vaccine public domain? Like, make it public domain, and then they can reproduce it anywhere, and then we can end AIDS. Like, doesn't everyone want to end AIDS? Well, maybe not you, but most people. I would assume most people are like, yeah, AIDS bad. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like, just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks why do older generations believe the things they believe, one of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our glorious gods, Xander Corvus and I'm Wrath, may you shower us with glory and smite our enemies. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we serve at your leisure, your grace. To our lords, Toefox, Bisexual Black Gamer, Jimothy K. Meeble Beeps Jr., Ryan Lubin, Trevor R., Jeffrey Lamb, Alexander Thaler, and Hans Josephine, we shall carry your banner high into the fields of battle. To our Knights of the Round Table, Timothy Hart, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophagic, Saren 42, Chronic de Hemphog, Gail Kotka, The Great Pudini, Bone Jenny, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, J. Fraser Cartwright, Thomas Barrington, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chitoro, Gufalankius, Zach Christensen, Nicholas Marks, Yopi, Josh Mickelson, Melissa Murphy, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Constance Joyce Lacheris. We lift our glasses of ale and we salute you.